Steelers Nation, every time this team steps onto the field, it feels like a fresh chapter gets written, and somehow the debates around the lineup just keep growing. What kicked off as a simple conversation about who technically starts a game turned into one of those classic discussions where the label of starter means almost nothing. Anyone who watches the National Football League closely already knows that the real story lives in the snap counts, not on the pre-game graphic. A guy can walk into the stadium listed as a first-string name and leave the afternoon having barely participated, while someone buried deeper in the rotation ends up shaping the entire game. That is exactly what unfolded with the wide receiver group. The official depth chart might still present Calvin Austin as one of the primary receivers, but the actual action on the field painted a very different picture. He was out there for a limited number of plays, not dramatically more than Ben Skoranek, who sits much further down that list. Meanwhile, Roman Wilson continued climbing into the coaching staff's trust, stacking meaningful snaps and showing a clearer integration into the offensive rhythm. Week by week, he has turned initial curiosity into genuine expectation, and it is becoming harder for anyone to ignore how his presence changes how the offense attacks a defense. The conversation naturally drifted toward the defensive side of the ball, where things became even more interesting. James Pierre suddenly stepped right into the spotlight, not because of drama or controversy, but because of performance, real, undeniable, noticeable impact. His outing was so strong that you could argue he was the best player on either team that afternoon, which says a lot when you consider how much the Steelers got from guys like Jaylen Warren, Darnell Washington, and Nick Herbig. Pierre did not just have a solid day. He changed the feel of the defense with the way he challenged passes, closed space, and responded to every route thrown his way. That is why the reaction around the city was loud the moment the head coach casually mentioned that when Darius Slay is healthy, he steps right back into his original role. The comment came off simple and straightforward, but the timing made it land with a thud among fans. Slay has not looked like himself this season, and when you place that next to the level Pierre has been playing at, it is natural for people to push back. But coaches think differently. They think in layers, contingencies, trust levels accumulated across years of work. To them, the word starter is not a prize, is a baseline. Pierre may not carry that title on paper, but he has forced his way into the real rotation. This era of the game brings something that makes all of this even more fascinating. Snap counts available to everyone. Every single rep is tracked and public, which means coaches can no longer hide usage patterns. When a player is thriving but barely sees the field, it becomes a public conversation within minutes. That visibility changes everything. And if there is one thing that the head coach has shown over the years, it is that he despises questions tied to snap distribution. He does not want to measure performances in numbers. He does not want players comparing reps. He does not want charts and totals becoming the story. His approach has always leaned toward instinct, rhythm, and the natural flow of the game. The problem is that the league no longer moves on instinct alone. When Jaylen Warren ends up with fewer snaps than Kenny Gainwell in a game where Warren was clearly the more explosive option, the numbers expose that immediately. When Darnell Washington spends long stretches on the sideline despite dominating whenever he is involved, everybody sees it now because the information is public and permanent. That is why comments about Slay returning to his full role hit such a nerve. They sound like decisions rooted in habit rather than what is unfolding on the field right now. Still, when the coach said he would continue playing Pierre while keeping Slay in his spot if healthy, what he really meant was something more nuanced. Slay may start a series, but start only means the first snap of a drive. If he gets targeted and gives up a long gain, even if it is not a touchdown, that is enough to trigger the adjustment. Pierre will be ready. Pierre has earned that right. And the coach knows that over the course of a game, instincts will tell him when to rotate. That flexibility is the part that does not show up when the comment is isolated and read without context. And the truth is that Pierre's production supports every bit of the argument that he deserves heavy usage. He leads the team in passes defended with 8, a number that becomes even more impressive when you look at the full details behind it. Opposing quarterbacks targeted him 23 times and completed only 10 passes. Of those 10, The total number of air yards allowed was 9. 9 yards on 10 catches. That means nearly every completion required the receiver to create yards after the catch, because Pierre simply has not been giving up space at the point of attack. That is not a fluke from one game. That is a pattern built over the season. And with his snap count climbing, including 65 snaps last Sunday, just one shy of the defensive total, he has become a foundational player in the secondary. He has been around for 6 seasons now, all of them in Pittsburgh, and that longevity gives him something coaches value deeply: familiarity. Not hope, not hype, reliability. You know how he plays. You know what he handles well. You know how he reacts under pressure. He might not have entered the year as the projected headline name in the secondary, but right now, it is impossible to pretend he has not outperformed expectations. I'm not going to pretend that things cannot shift dramatically once kickoff arrives, because the National Football League finds a way to surprise everyone every single week. Slay could go out there and have a flawless game. He could struggle early and see a quick rotation. Pierre could continue his rise. Anything is on the table. But the evidence from this season shows that Pierre is not going back to the bench. Not with this level of play. Not with this type of consistency. Not when the entire defense seems to lift when he locks onto his assignment. If Sunday comes and Slay ends up taking every snap while the defense gets torched, the outrage will be justified. But right now, the pattern suggests something very different from the simple headline of Slay returns. It suggests a balancing act where both players see action, where performance dictates involvement, and where the label of starter is nothing more than a formality that lasts one snap. Shifting over to the quarterback discussion, the uncertainty hovering around the position this week added yet another layer to everything unfolding at the South Side. The situation with Aaron Rodgers created an unusual dynamic, one that forced everyone to pay even closer attention to every word coming out of the building. What turned heads was not just that he was injured, but how openly the head coach talked about the entire process. Normally, when he is asked about injuries or availability, he keeps the answer as short as possible. This time, though, he went into detail. Not dramatic detail, but enough to hint that the decision has already been moving in a certain direction long before anyone outside the team realized it. That is why so many fans started picking apart every quote, trying to read between the lines to see if Mason Rudolph was being set up to step in. The idea of gamesmanship always floats around in this league because coaches constantly hold information back, especially when an opponent is preparing to face them. But if you listen closely, the coach's tone gave off something different. There was no hedging. There was no evasive maneuver. There was no attempt to leave Chicago guessing. Instead, it almost felt like he had accepted the reality of the situation and was making peace with what the next few days would look like at practice. He made it clear Rodgers was not going to be on the field that day. He hinted strongly that he would not practice the next day either. And when a quarterback misses extended practice time in a week where the team is installing new material tailored for a specific opponent, that typically signals that the team is preparing for the backup to take over. Not because they want to hide anything, not because they want to create drama, but simply because the starter cannot run the offense if he cannot participate in the essential sessions leading up to the game. The way the coach explained things painted a picture of someone who genuinely prefers letting the medical staff dictate the timeline. He is not the type to rush a player back. He is not going to override the people who evaluate injuries every day. He wants to know exactly what the athlete can tolerate, what the movement looks like, how the pain responds, and whether there is any additional risk involved. And with a fractured wrist, the margin for error shrinks. One wrong landing could take a short-term problem and turn it into a long-term absence. No head coach wants that, and certainly not in a season where the margins between wins and losses are razor thin. What makes the story even more intriguing is how well Mason Rudolph played in relief. This was not a case where the backup came in and simply survived. He stepped onto the field and looked calm, decisive, and confident. He protected the ball. He kept the offense moving. He gave the team stability in a moment where things could easily have spiraled. So when fans bring up the possibility of him starting, it is not coming from a place of panic. It is coming from a place of logic. If Rodgers is injured and Rudolph is playing well, this is not a gamble. It is simply the right move for the moment. There is also the factor of how the coach tends to operate verbally. After covering him for this long, you start to notice when he is leaning in one direction more heavily. Every once in a while, he reveals more than he intends, not because he slips up, but because he talks himself through a situation aloud. That is exactly what happened when he walked through questions about Rodgers. The explanation felt too open, too natural, too unguarded to be gamesmanship. Every comment pointed toward the same direction, ruggedly preparing for Rudolph to take over if Rodgers does not show the progress needed to practice late in the week. The team also prepared Will Howard to serve as the backup behind Rudolph, which tells its own story. You do not elevate a rookie into a bigger role unless you anticipate needing him in that position. It is not something coaches do lightly, and it is especially not something they do on a short week or while juggling uncertainty at the top of the depth chart. The staff clearly wanted the structure in place early, not on the fly, which suggests they expect to move forward with Rudolph unless Rodgers surprises everyone. But the quarterback situation is only one part of the bigger picture. The entire team is walking into a stretch where every decision matters, every snap matters, and every rotation might shift the outcome of a game. This week, the offense and defense both carry storylines that blend together into a narrative about trust. Trust in how a secondary should be arranged. Trust in which quarterback should lead the huddle. Trust in the players who have earned bigger roles through their performances, not through the ink on a depth chart. The locker room feels this kind of energy. Players pay attention to snap counts far more than people realize. They might not say it openly, but they are aware of how often they are on the field compared to others. When someone like Pierre starts rising, everyone recognizes it. They see the passes he breaks up. They see the coverage distances he closes. They see how offenses stop testing his side of the field. That builds respect within the team, and the coaches feel that energy too, even if the head coach insists he is not tracking snap totals. This is where football becomes a strange mixture of planning and reaction. Coaches design ideal scenarios each week, but once the game starts, everything becomes fluid. A player might go in expecting 20 snaps and end up with 60 because he is simply performing too well to remove. Or a starter might get benched after 3 plays because the matchup is all wrong. Fans love to argue about starting roles because it feels like the simplest way to measure hierarchy. In reality, the hierarchy shifts with every series. That is why the comments about Slay and the quarterback situation stirred such loud discussions across Pittsburgh. People are no longer willing to accept the starting lineup as the final answer. They want the rotation to reflect reality, not reputation. They want the players who perform to stay on the field. And this season, Pierre has made that case louder than anyone could have predicted. He does not need the title to validate his impact, because every rep he has taken proves he belongs. The beauty and chaos of a National Football League live in these constant shifts. One week, a player is filling in. The next week, he is too essential to take off the field. One week, a quarterback is listed as questionable. The next week, he is on the sideline watching a backup take full control. Somewhere in the middle of all of this, teams try to maintain stability, communication, rhythm, and chemistry. But before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and hit the like button on this video. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on the Pittsburgh Steelers. And don't forget to share your thoughts on the news in the comments below. Pittsburgh has reportedly shaken the NFL world with whispers of a blockbuster move that has fans buzzing like never before. Sources suggest that the Steelers have made a daring move to poach Jordan Love, the rising star quarterback from a direct rival. While no official announcement has been made, the mere speculation has sent the Steelers faithful into a frenzy, sparking wild debates online, in bars, and on sports radio across the city. Love, known for his rocket arm and poise under pressure, has been a tantalizing presence in the league, and the idea of him donning black and gold ignites both excitement and disbelief. Imagine the combination of Pittsburgh's storied offensive line with Love's ability to extend plays. Fans are already envisioning highlight reels and playoff drives that could redefine the team's trajectory. Critics, of course, question whether this is just media smoke or a strategic masterstroke by Pittsburgh's front office, but speculation alone has the city practically vibrating with anticipation. Social media has exploded with Steelers supporters claiming, finally, a franchise quarterback, while rival fans express outrage at what some are calling an audacious raid. Analysts are already dissecting potential schemes, imagining how Love's skill set might integrate with the Steelers' existing playbook. Meanwhile, merchandise sellers are quietly celebrating. Even a whisper of a signing like this tends to move jerseys and hats faster than any official deal could. The rumor also raises questions about team dynamics. How will the locker room react to the sudden appearance of a high-profile talent snatched from a direct competitor? Could this spark a chain reaction across the league, prompting other teams to make bold, headline-grabbing moves in response? Fans are hungry for answers, and every teaser, every offhand comment from coaches or executives is being analyzed with feverish intensity. While the final chapter is far from written, the notion that Jordan Love could be in Pittsburgh has already captured the imagination of Steelers fans everywhere. The city is abuzz, sports bars are packed, and online forums are ablaze with predictions, debates, and dreams of a new era. Whether it's reality or just a tantalizing rumor, one thing is clear. The Steelers have managed to dominate the conversation and send a ripple of excitement through the entire NFL landscape. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to keep receiving exclusive news about the Pittsburgh Steelers, make sure to subscribe to Steelers Nation Central and give this video a like. We always look forward to hearing your comments and opinions. See you in the next video.